Today I want to talk about accelerationism. And this is an incredibly popular sentiment, which, believe me, I understand the appeal. You know, it's like maybe if things get bad enough, it'll all just come tumbling down and we can get back to, you know, interesting and exciting things like wandering the post-apocalyptic wastes, you know, scouring them for female survivors to add to our harems, you know, instead of this bullshit, which, believe me, I understand the appeal. The major problem, though, is you don't know how bad things can get. You know, I don't know how bad things can get. I have some idea, but I really don't know, and I don't want to find out, because just what I can find out is bad enough. I mean, you only have to look as far as North Korea, which is a strange, fucked up, sad little country. And granted, it does have outside assistance, it does have powerful allies and whatnot, but that country has kind of managed to muddle along more or less as it is for a number of generations now, many decades. And so if that can be a going proposition for that long, you know, things can get a lot worse than they are here, obviously. And there are other examples. You have Cambodia, which managed to kill a lot more of its population, relatively speaking, you know, proportionally speaking, than even North Korea has. You have, you know, places like Stalinist Russia, where, you know, Joseph Stalin starved something like 10 million Ukrainians to death in the Holodomor. And that didn't bring the system down. That didn't cause everything to collapse. He did it specifically to preserve the hierarchy that he was the head of, and to preserve his position in that hierarchy, and, you know, arguably succeeded. It certainly didn't bring it down. So, you know, things can get a lot worse than they are now. And you notice by now probably that these are all communist examples, which I think are appropriate, because we're kind of dealing with a communist menace, right? It's not a traditional communist menace. It's not the traditional classical Marxism, but it is cultural Marxism, which is, you know, another branch of the same tree. You know, bearing the same kind of poisoned fruit as the communism of old, maybe worse in a lot of respects. So these are very apt examples. There are non-communist examples. You know, Haiti is pretty bad. A lot of countries in Africa are pretty bad. That's kind of an example of where you can end up with rampant dysgenia, or rather the absence of eugenia. You know, they've never really had eugenic pressures in their entire evolutionary history, and you know, that's the result. And we've been giving way to rampant dysgenia within our populations and in terms of who we're importing and everything else, and that's the direction we're headed. So there's another example of how bad it can get. And you don't want to find out how bad, because, you know, those places aren't even scratching the surface. They're still there. They're still like they are. They're not improving, or at least not greatly, or not rapidly, or not as much as we would like to see. So, you know, this idea that collapse or decline inevitably gives us an opportunity for regrowth is frankly just a lot of nonsense for the most part. And we don't know how bad it can get before things can collapse. We don't know how bad it can get after that. And we don't have any guarantees that it can or will get better subsequent to those points. So, you know, a better strategy would be to start to make things better now, and to do so incrementally. And, you know, there are a variety of ways to do that. You know, obviously there are positive things you can build and you can create that would be good for us, good for our people, good for our countries. You know, we need platforms. We need, you know, banks and payment processors. We need media of communications, and, you know, various other things. But, you know, there's also some retaliatory stuff we can do incrementally. There's some enforcement stuff we can do incrementally. You know, the old saw, or the old example that comes from like economics textbooks. Specifically, this was in David D. Friedman's Price Theory textbook as an example problem. He's like, you're being chased through the forest by bandits. on a horse, and you've got 10 arrows, but there are 20 bandits. How do you get away? Well, you can't shoot them all, but you can shoot the front one, and then you can shoot the front one, and then you can shoot the front one, and hopefully before you run out of arrows, you can get them competing not to be in front. Now this is pertinent to these virtue signaling social justice corporations, right? Because there's always one or a few of these corporations in the news for some egregious example of virtue signaling. Here lately it's been Gillette with their toxic masculinity razor ad. And you know, by the way, Gillette is now a new slur for an effeminate or non-masculine man. That guy's such a Gillette. So you know, run with that. But the other thing is, you know, you can punish these companies, and we can't punish all of them for being egregious virtue signaling social justice hives of you know, wickedness and corruption. But there's always one or a few of them in the news as, you know, being more politically correct than the others, and so you know, we can focus our efforts on one or a few of them at a time and get them competing not to be the most toxically virtue signally. So you know, one thing maybe you could do with Gillette is don't stop buying their razors. Start buying them and returning them, you know, preferably open and maybe rusty, you know. And being infected with social justice ideology, toxic anti-male, anti-Western ideology is a legitimate defect with a razor. So you could invoke the return policy here on this item if your retailer has them, and you can make these razors expensive to carry for vendors and you know, hopefully charge back against Gillette. They've done a rational cost-benefit analysis here, and they've concluded they're going to pick up more business from women and soy boys, who shall henceforth be known as Gillettes. They've calculated they're going to pick up more business from these effeminate demographics than they'll lose from real men. But what they haven't done is reckoned the cost column correctly, because we can impose costs. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. I don't recommend you do any of the illegal ones. In fact, I discourage it. But there are legal ways you can do that if there are return policies to abuse and whatnot. One thing I've also done on occasion from time to time is put Ben & Jerry's ice cream on the soup aisle of the supermarket. You know, unrelated, because that's actually helping them, you know, acquire shelf space and market share on the soup aisle. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But there are ways we can punish these companies, you know, maybe one at a time, and maybe we can get them competing not to stand out, not to be conspicuously virtue signally and politically correct and conspicuously proponents of cultural Marxism. And so you know, that's called incremental suppression. It's a marginal strategy of enforcement. Even if we were powerful, we wouldn't be able to suppress all of this at one go. You know, even if we were in charge, we would have to pick the most egregious examples and start working our way down the list. But being as we're not in charge and we're not powerful at the moment, then we take a different incremental strategy, a different marginal strategy, where we start punishing the individuals and organizations within our reach in whatever small ways that we can. So we take you know, whatever modest steps and whatever little retaliatory measures that we can against parasitism and fraud and degeneracy and lies and grotesque perversions and all these other things that have proliferated. And hopefully by slicing away at them little by little, it's a bologna slice strategy, so to speak, you know, we can widen the sphere of things that are not that are honorable and honest and just and good and fair and glorious. And It's an incremental approach to achieving that, and that's the way we have to go. Not accelerationism, not, cuck my shit up, fam, as appealing as that is, because we don't know how bad it can get. And so it makes more sense to start improving things now. And the only place we can start is where we can start. And the little things that are within reach that we have control over in our day-to-day lives. And, there are positive ways you can instantiate that. There are positive things you can do and build, for our people and for our movements and for our countries and for our values. And there are also retaliatory and enforcement things you can do, little things on a small scale, working ever outward and upwards. If we were powerful, we could start with the most egregious examples and work down, but because we're not powerful, we have to start with the things that are within our reach and work out and work up. And so, no matter how we slice it, hopefully we'll get there eventually. And as always, there's going to be more discussion on the private video I post on my Patreon, so I'll see you there.